The boardroom pulsed with tension as alarms on every device erupted, screens flashing with headlines that shattered the calm. Michael Grant said, "What the hell is this?" His voice cracked under the weight of betrayal spilling into daylight. Across the table, Sarah Grant whispered, "It's gone public. They're moving against you." The company's empire, built on decades of ambition, trembled as news anchors screamed hostile takeover. Advisors shuffled papers, eyes darting, fear spreading like fire. Michael gripped the mahogany table, his knuckles white, his control slipping through clenched fists. The faces around him blurred, loyalty dissolving as whispers turned into accusations. James Cole, the trusted CFO, leaned forward with a mask of concern, but behind his calm words, shadows of deceit flickered. Michael's chest heaved as realization sank in. This wasn't an attack from rivals. It was family blood turning venom. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within, rain pelting glass walls as thunder cracked, amplifying the unraveling empire. Michael said, "Who gave them access? Who opened the door?" Silence hung heavy until Sarah's tearful eyes betrayed guilt she couldn't speak aloud. In that moment, Michael's world collapsed into noise, betrayal, and fury. The corridors echoed with hurried footsteps as Michael stormed out, rage pressing against composure. Assistants froze, clutching files, avoiding his eyes. Michael said, "Lock down communications now." His voice ricocheted against steel walls. Sarah trailed behind, voice breaking. "Michael, you can't fight this alone." The storm outside roared, louder, mirroring the fracture within. His empire wasn't just crumbling. It was being gutted from inside. Whispers followed him like shadows. Every loyal face now seemed suspect. In the reflection of glass, he caught his own face, haunted, weathered, cornered. In his office, Michael hurled a folder across the room, papers scattering like broken trust. He stared out at the rain-soaked skyline, breathing heavily. Michael said, "Decades of loyalty, and this is how it ends." Sarah's reflection appeared in the window behind him, her face pale with guilt. "It's not too late," she whispered, though the tremor in her tone betrayed doubt. Lightning cut through the skyline, illuminating his isolation. His voice hardened. "Someone inside gave them everything, and I'll find out who." James entered quietly, his tone carefully measured. "We still have options, Michael," he said smoothly, stepping over scattered papers. Michael glared, the silence louder than thunder. Sarah looked between them, eyes wide, knowing trust was already fractured. James added, "If we move fast, we can salvage control, but hesitation will finish us." His voice dripped with manufactured calm, but undercurrents of control pushed beneath. Michael exhaled sharply, his eyes fixed like daggers. Meeting spilled into darkness as power flickered. The building groaned against the storm's weight, a metaphor of collapse. Michael said, "If you're not with me, you're against me." His voice cut through silence, an ultimatum born of desperation. Sarah whispered, "Michael, please." Her words fragile. James' lips curved almost imperceptibly as thunder drowned his reply. The shadows deepened, alliances shifting under the cover of night. Michael slammed the office door behind him, the storm still rattling glass walls. His voice thundered louder than the rain. Michael said, "This company is my blood, and I'll burn anyone who tries to take it." Sarah stood near his desk, trembling, her hands tightening around a silver pendant as though it could anchor her guilt. James entered without knocking, his calm unnerving. "We need to move our assets offshore now," James insisted, his eyes cool, probing for weakness. Michael glared. "You think I don't see the knives at my back? Someone inside gave them the blueprint to destroy me." Sarah whispered, "It wasn't me, Michael." Yet her voice broke like glass, fragile and unconvincing. The silence stretched until thunder split the skyline, revealing the storm was not just outside, but consuming them all. Michael's loyal confidant, Daniel Price, stepped into the office. Daniel said, "Michael, I've contained the media for now, but leaks are spreading like wildfire." His weary tone carried both loyalty and fear. Michael gestured toward James. "You see what's happening? They're eating us alive." James replied smoothly, "Then cut the weak branches before the tree collapses." Sarah's eyes darted between them, panic swirling. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You can't fight this with purges. Trust is all you have left." Michael snapped. "Trust is dead. Loyalty is ash." Daniel's silence confirmed the fracture. In the dim boardroom, executives gathered under flickering lights. Panic buzzed like static. Michael declared, "From this moment, no decisions are made without me." His words carried fire, but behind him, whispers betrayed fear. James leaned close to one executive, voice too low for Michael. "You follow him, you'll sink with him." Sarah watched, torn between loyalty and survival. Daniel said, "Michael, if you keep tightening the leash, you'll choke what's left of us." Michael shot back, better choked than gutted. The board dissolved into chaos, stormlight dancing over pale faces. Later, Sarah cornered Michael near the panoramic windows. Rain streaks blurred the skyline. She whispered, "If you push too hard, they'll break you." Michael turned sharply. "They already broke me." "This is war now." His reflection on the glass looked more like a haunted stranger than a leader. Sarah's lips trembled. "You can still salvage this if you trust someone," Michael said. "Trust is what ruined me." His words echoed with bitterness, the storm outside roaring in agreement. That night, Michael sat alone in his office, silence pressed like a weight. The empire he built loomed over the city below, but inside the walls felt hollow. He muttered, "I raised wolves, and now they're at my throat." Files lay scattered, evidence of betrayal. Daniel entered, his voice quiet. "They'll come for you in the board meeting tomorrow." Michael's eyes burned with defiance. "Then let them. I'll show them what war looks like." The storm rolled across the skyline, the night carrying more than just thunder. The boardroom filled with tension the next morning, sunlight hidden by storm clouds. Executives shuffled uneasily. Michael entered with steel in his eyes, declaring, "This company will not fall today." James smiled faintly, leaning back in his chair like a vulture waiting. Sarah sat quietly, hands clasped, praying for stability. Daniel whispered to Michael, "They've counted votes already." Michael clenched his jaw. "Then I'll break their count." The room pulsed with suspense, silence hanging heavier than the storm. James rose smoothly, his voice slick as oil. "We all respect Michael's legacy, but we cannot cling to a captain who's steering us into rocks." Gasps spread. Michael slammed his palm onto the table. "You think you can steal my empire in daylight?" James smiled coolly. "It's not theft if it's survival." Sarah whispered under her breath, "James, please stop." But his eyes ignored her, fixed only on Michael. Daniel barked, "This is betrayal, pure and simple." The board fractured into whispers and panic, storm winds rattling glass. The vote was called. One by one, hands rose, betrayal painted across familiar faces. Michael scanned the room, his world collapsing with each raised arm. He said, "I gave you everything, and you repay me with knives." Sarah's eyes welled, unable to meet his gaze. James counted votes with the predator's calm, his smile widening as numbers favored him. Daniel muttered, "They'll regret this," his face stone. Michael's silence burned hotter than his words, his empire bleeding in plain sight. The vote ended, but Michael refused to bow. He stood, his voice sharp. "You think this is over? You haven't seen war yet." Executives recoiled at the venom in his tone. James smirked. "Then let the war begin." Sarah clutched her necklace tighter, whispering, "This will destroy us all." Daniel slammed his fist on the table, echoing Michael's rage. The storm cracked thunder above, sealing the declaration with fury. After the meeting, Michael walked alone through the rain-soaked parking lot. His suit clung to his body, soaked, but his steps carried rage instead of defeat. He whispered to himself, "You'll bleed for this." Sarah watched from the lobby glass, tears streaking her cheeks. James departed in a sleek car, windows tinted, smile hidden in shadow. Daniel approached Michael, umbrella in hand, but Michael refused. He wanted the storm to baptize his fury. Morning broke behind bruised clouds as crisis teams filled the floor with muted chatter and blinking dashboards. Michael Grant said, "Push a statement that we're stable." Daniel Price said, "Stability means control of the narrative." James Cole stood near the window, as if measuring the drop. He said, "Markets punish silence more than pain." The news feed cut to Olivia Hart, whose poised smile sliced through the room. Olivia Hart said, "My offer protects jobs and shareholders." Michael felt the words strike like cold iron. Sarah Grant whispered, "She's everywhere." Michael said, "Abdi, us," Daniel said. "If we answer, we confirm fear," James said. "If we don't, rumors become fact." Michael watched the ticker tremble and said, "Draft a counter that names no enemies and promises action." Olivia returned on screen and promised governance reform with outside capital. Michael said, "She's not alone." Sarah stared at the floor and said, "She never is." The air tightened as thunder rolled distant and deliberate. Michael said, "Prepare the board for a vote of confidence." Daniel nodded while James smiled without warmth. In the hotel, atrium bar, greenery and marble swallowed sound, while cameras watched without blinking. Olivia Hart said, "Sign, keep your title, let me steer the ship." Michael Grant said, "You want the crown without the scars." Olivia swirled mineral water like a ritual and said, "You brought wolves to your table." Michael said, "One of them is wearing your perfume." Olivia smiled and said, "Loyalty is a currency, and mine is liquid." Sarah Grant appeared at a distance, hesitating at a column before turning away. Michael said, "You will not carve my people for parts." Olivia said, "Then teach them to swim during a flood." He leaned forward, voice low, "Tell your partner, I know the door he used." She laughed softly and said, "Doors are built by architects you fed for years." The atrium's echo returned like a verdict. Michael stood, and Olivia did not follow. The old founder's office smelled of leather and regret, trophies turning to silhouettes in the dim. Leonard Bishop said, "I once mistook fear for loyalty." Michael Grant said, "I mistook loyalty for armor." Leonard set a fountain pen on the desk like a gavel. He said, "You will lose the vote unless you bleed on purpose." Michael frowned. Leonard said, "Offer a sacrifice that looks like a cure." Michael said, "You want me to cut my own power?" Leonard said, "Or watch them cut the company." The rain eased into a hush that made choices audible. Michael said, "If I swing the blade, it must land where infection hides." Leonard said, "Then stop searching the mirror and search the keys." Michael nodded slowly, feeling the edge of decision sharpen. In operations, servers thrummed like a nervous heart, while dashboards mapped secrets in color. Chloe Reed said, "Unusual access spikes traced to an internal badge." Daniel Price said, "Can you isolate the route without tripping alarms?" Chloe typed with steady hands. She said, "There's a shadow relay feeding an outside mirror." James Cole arrived with a smile that carried warning. He said, Audit later. We have filings to finish. Chloe did not look up. She said, the relay is named for a sea myth. Daniel said, kill it. Chloe said, if I kill it now, we lose the trail. Michael Grant arrived at the doorway, silent as a verdict. He said, follow it to the source. James said, this is a distraction. Michael said, so is every trap before it snaps. The stalk snapped like a dry branch at open, halting after a flood of rumor that smelled manufactured. Michael Grant said, issue the internal letter now. Daniel Price said, plain words, no bravado. Sarah Grant hovered near the printer, eyes fixed on the floor. James Cole said, we must consider a bridge loan tied to conditions. Michael said, whose conditions? The answer arrived as a calendar invite stamped with a private equity logo. Michael said, schedule the call and record everything. Daniel said, if they demand collateral, they will ask for your throne. Michael said, then they can bring a ladder. The printer spat warm paper like breath. He signed with a hand that no longer shook. The board assembled under a sky scraped raw by wind, while a new guest took the head chair without apology. Victor Hale said, I hold the paper that keeps you breathing. Michael Grant said, at a price that steals the lungs. James Cole shuffled term sheets like a dealer. Sarah Grant stood near the window as if distance could erase signatures. Victor said, convertible instruments, governance reset, immediate oversight. Michael said, and a puppet crown. Victor smiled and said, call it shared guidance. Daniel Price said, call it seizure with perfumes. The room, it's seizure with perfumes. The room tensed until silence cut everything into edges. Michael said, who opened the gate? No one answered, but the projector threw a log of authorizations across the wall. Sarah's name sat beside a midnight timestamp, and the room inhaled like it had been dunked in ice. In the quiet of a side conference room, the storm sounded like a slow confession. Michael Grant said, tell me why. Sarah Grant said, I was drowning us or saving us, and I chose a door. Michael said, you chose Victor. She said, I chose time. He paced the carpet like a cage. She said, he promised a lifeline if I proved the company could be taken without blood. Michael said, he asked for blood, and you delivered mine. Her hands trembled around a glass of water that she could not drink. He said, did James engineer it? She whispered. He scripted it? The word hung like a bell tolling the end of a service. Michael looked at the door and said, then the service is over. Night pressed close in operations where the relay pulsed like a heartbeat that wasn't theirs. Chloe Reed said, the mirror endpoint just blinked. Daniel Price said, where does it land? Chloe said, a private cloud tied to a shell. Noah Briggs stepped from the shadows, with a badged smile that did not reach his eyes. Noah Briggs said, unplug anything and you lose the thread. Michael Grant stepped in behind him. He said, leave the thread. Take the hand pulling it. Chloe's script sprang a silent capture. Noah reached for his phone, but Daniel's grip was faster. Michael said, you've been sending our lungs to Victor. Noah said, everyone wants air. The relay froze inside a screen grab shaped like a confession. Leonard Bishop met Michael in the glass stairwell, where the city stacked like chessboards. Leonard Bishop said, you can save the company or your comfort. Michael Grant said, comfort left when the alarms began. Leonard said, then cut the debt at the root and graft a poison pill. Michael said, they will call it cowardice. Leonard said, let them spell it survival. Michael looked over the city as if searching for a clean horizon and found none. Leonard said, bring a white knight with clean hands and a short leash. Michael nodded and said, and if the leash breaks? Leonard said, then build a cage with terms. The wind pushed against glass with the sound of pages turning. The call with investors began in perfect civility and slid toward the cliff with every clause. Victor Hale said, "Accept the governance reset, and I will stabilize the cash." Michael Grant said, "Bring transparency and I will consider a bridge." Olivia Hart joined with charm, sharpened to a point. Olivia Hart said, "Time is a luxury your people cannot afford." Daniel Price messaged Chloe Reed, who nodded from a distant desk as traces compiled into a single map. Michael said, "I see the source of your confidence." He pushed a file to the screen that mapped funds to a trust with his own family name woven through it like a blade. Victor said nothing for a long second that felt like an epoch. Michael said, "You financed this with my inheritance." Sarah Grant closed her eyes as if she could black out history. The silence became the loudest sound in the city. Dawn crawled over the city like a warning as emergency emails stacked to the horizon. Michael Grant said, "File the injunction and freeze their bridge." Daniel Price said, "Courts open in 30. Our affidavit is razor thin, but true." Sarah Grant hovered by the glass, voice brittle. Sarah Grant said, "If you escalate, Victor will call your debt and snap the floor." Michael paced, jaw locked, and stared at the map of accounts like it could bleed. Chloe Reed pinged in from operations, steady and unblinking. Chloe Reed said, "The relay ties to a trust seeded from your family office." Michael tasted iron in his mouth and hated the taste of history. James Cole entered with immaculate calm and a smile that erased warmth. James Cole said, "Investors require adult supervision, not theater." Daniel moved between them like a wall. Daniel Price said, "Adult supervision does not include theft." The building's AVAC hummed like a verdict between storms. Michael said, "Pull the contracts, pull the traffic, pull the mask off." Sarah turned away from her reflection and did not move back. Outside, sirens braided with morning traffic, and the day decided to choose sides. The courthouse smelled of wet coats and urgency as rain found every doorway. Michael Grant said, "We request a temporary restraining order against unauthorized governance acts." Victor Hale appeared by video, eyes like polished stone. Victor Hale said, "The company asked for oxygen, not fear." Olivia Hart's counsel spoke like a metronome. Counsel said, "Shareholders deserve competence and sunlight." Daniel Price slid exhibits across the table like chess pieces. Daniel Price said, "This is sunlight, and it burns where it should." Chloe Reed's screenshots glowed with the relay's heartbeat. The judge read in silence so heavy it bent air. Sarah Grant stared at the floor tiles and tried not to tremble. James Cole whispered to his attorney, a shadow within a shadow. Michael said, "We are not asking for mercy, only time to stop a theft." The gavel landed, clean and cold. The order granted a pause, thin as glass but sharp enough to cut. Outside, rain felt less like grief and more like armor. Back at headquarters, the pause cracked open new noise. Traders pinged, clients hovered, and rumors swarmed like flies on a bruise. Michael Grant said, "We hold town hall now." He walked into the atrium where fear had built a nest. Michael said, "You built this company with me, and you will not lose it to ghosts." An engineer asked if they should plan exits. Michael said, "Plan work, plan courage. I will not sell you for quiet." Daniel Price outlined the injunction and the corridor ahead. Chloe Reed said, "Security will rotate perimeter. No one walks alone with root access." Sarah Grant watched faces she knew for years and wore their doubt like a coat. James Cole clapped once, slow, and said nothing at all. The crowd breathed again, not easy, but as one body. Michael felt the weight shift a fraction toward him. He said, "We are bruised, not broken. Tonight we move the board." Thunder did not answer, and that was its own mercy. Evening drew a blade across the skyline as the pre-board huddle formed. Leonard Bishop said, "White Knight ready. Terms bite, but they do not infect." Michael Grant said, "I will sign pain if it keeps us breathing." Daniel Price said, "The pill is drafted. Trigger at a hostile threshold." Chloe Reed said, "We hardened access." Noah's badge is flagged and corralled. Sarah Grant kept her eyes on the term sheet, lips pressed thin. James Cole stood under a corridor lamp like he owned the light. James Cole said, "Investors will hate dilution." Leonard Bishop said, "They will hate a bonfire more." Michael said, "Call of the vote, then call the dawn." He looked at Sarah and found a storm he could not read. He said, "Do what you must, and I will own what I did." The words landed without tremor, and that scared him most. A siren stitched the night 3 floors below. Michael exhaled through the fear and sharpened his will to a point. The building waited like a lung before the next breath. Night gathered every secret for the board session and put them on the table. Victor Hale joined by video with an accountant's smile. Olivia Hart leaned in, every syllable tailored. Michael Grant said, "I move to adopt the pill and approve a rescue facility from an independent party." James Cole said, "I move to replace the chair with interim oversight." Votes collided like weather fronts. Daniel Price tracked numbers, eyes dry and merciless. Sarah Grant lifted her hand, then held it in the air like a confession. She said, "I second the pill." The room stilled as though a wire had snapped. James Cole's face did not move, but his eyes recoiled. Michael looked at Sarah with shock and something like grief. Victor Hale's voice thinned across the speaker. Victor Hale said, "You will regret this dilution." Michael said, "I can live with regret. I cannot live with theft." The tally closed, and survival flickered to life like a stubborn light. Dawn returned colder, and with it, a leak that dripped poison into every feed. Headlines screamed about a family trust and a CEO's double life. Michael Grant read the smear and felt only focus. Michael said, "They missed the key. The trust paid them, not me." Daniel Price said, "We finished the trap today." Chloe Reed said, "Relay endpoint reawakened at 7:02. Sarah Grant stood beside them, chin lifted. Sarah Grant said, "Send my statement and attach the authorization logs." James Cole arrived with counsel, face arranged into outrage. James Cole said, "You are destroying confidence for theater." Michael said, "Confidence does not require perjury." They walked to the press room, a corridor of lenses and appetites. Leonard Bishop waited with the White Knight term sheet like a shield. Michael felt the weight of every name that would stay or go. He said, "We tell the city the bones and let the city judge." No thunder answered, only the hum of lights about to burn. Cameras blinked awake as the story rewired itself in real time. Michael Grant said, "Funds traced to a shell controlled by parties on your screens." Victor Hale kept his gaze flat. Olivia Hart did not blink. Chloe Reed projected transaction paths like constellations. Daniel Price read the injunction terms that bit like iron. Sarah Grant said, "I enabled access, and I am accountable. I did it under pressure I misjudged." A murmur rippled through the room and did not become a wave. James Cole stepped forward, voice honeyed. James Cole said, "This circus hides incompetence." Michael said, "Then let numbers speak." He published metrics showing recovery and cash runway under the new facility. The room recalibrated, lenses leaning closer. An anchor asked if leadership would change. Michael said, "Leadership already did. It chose transparency over theater." Outside, the city lightened as if the sky had decided to watch. The final board confrontation felt smaller than the storm that birthed it. Paperwork stacked like barricades. Michael Grant said, "Motion to remove James for cause and refer findings to regulators." Silence swallowed the room before anyone breathed. James Cole said, "You will not survive the retaliation." Daniel Price said, "We survive the truth. We do not survive rot." Chloe Reed filed the capture logs into the record like nails in a crate. Sarah Grant met James' eyes and did not look away. She said, "I will testify to the scripts and the timing." Victor Hale's video tile blinked out without goodbye. Olivia Hart said, "We will proceed separately." Michael felt no victory, only an ache where trust used to live. The vote rolled forward, careful and final. The chair announced the result in a voice that had carried heavier news. Michael said, "We will rebuild with scars." The room did not applaud. It simply stood and exhaled. Afternoon found the atrium filled with people who had run out of breath and decided to keep breathing anyway. Michael Grant said, "No layoffs under this facility. We cut vanity, not bone." A cheer began small and chose to live. Daniel Price outlined new governance that closed the doors wolves had used. Chloe Reed announced an internal bug bounty with bonuses paid in daylight. Sarah Grant said, "I will step back from finance and support transition." The words cost her, and she paid in public. Michael looked across faces that had held the company up when money did not. He said, "You kept us alive. The rest is my job." Leonard Bishop watched from the mezzanine like a tired lighthouse. The city beyond the glass seemed less like an opponent and more like terrain. The crowd quieted without being told. They were tired and they were together. It would be enough for today. The scoreboard on the wall ticked green by a hair's width. Sometimes survival is a color. Night returned without thunder as Michael stood alone in the founder's office. City light painted the desk in lanes. He placed the pen Leonard had used in the middle of the wood, like a marker on a map. Michael Grant said, "I keep the company, but I do not keep the crown." Daniel Price entered quietly and understood before the words landed. Daniel Price said, "You step back, and we stay whole." Michael nodded once. He said, "Appoint an independent chair. Make Chloe interim operations lead. Let Scars write policy." Sarah Grant paused at the doorway, eyes red but steady. Sarah Grant said, "I will answer for what I did until answers are no longer needed." Michael looked past them to the city that had judged and not destroyed him. He said, "Tomorrow belongs to the work, not the noise." The room did not disagree. He turned off the light and let the skyline finish the sentence. Outside, a siren drifted away instead of closer, and that felt like grace.